In the United States, the horrific sequence began just before 9 o'clock local time. Two planes crashed into the Twin Towers of the World Trade Center in New York, causing both buildings to collapse eventually. It's not yet known how many people were killed. There is the plane going into the building, but at least 50,000 people work in those towers. A third plane then crashed into the Pentagon Defense Headquarters in Washington, just across the river from the White House. At least one of the planes was hijacked before being used in the attack. Hospitals in New York City and New York State are reported to be overwhelmed with casualties. Many, according to doctors, are severely burned from head to toe, according to one doctor in Greenwich Village. Rudy Giuliani has ordered the evacuation of Lower Manhattan. He's the mayor of New York City. The evacuation, too, of all government buildings, including the White House, has taken place in Washington, D.C. All civilian aircraft in the United States were grounded shortly afterwards by the FAA. The Mexican authorities have just announced that the US-Mexico border has been closed and Canada has closed all airports. Let's get one eyewitness report as the towers were hit and then collapsed.
I was in B Tower.
B Tower?
A Tower.
What floor were you on?
B1.
What floor?
The first one.
What happened? Tell me.
When a big explosion happened, some guy came out, his skin was all off. I helped him out. This is him all over. There's people jumping out of windows. I've seen at least 14 people jumping out of windows. It's horrific. I can't believe this is happening.
Anything else that you saw? Were you there for the second hit by the plane?
About 10 minutes later, the second building went off.
Did you see it?
Yes, I saw it. It just blew up. A big explosion. People started running. It was just chaos everywhere. People jumping out. People just kept jumping and jumping and jumping. And you could still see they were alive because they were flailing around.
The FBI has already stepped in to investigate. It could be possibly a terrorist strike.
It could be. It could be because the first one went off and then 10 minutes later this just blew up out of nowhere.
Hard to think that that would just be accidental.
No, I don't think it would be accidental.
An eyewitness in New York City. President George W. Bush in Sarasota in Florida broke off a speech to talk about what was, quote, apparently a terrorist attack. But at this stage, I have to emphasize, no one has claimed responsibility, and we have no idea who may have been behind what appear to be, and I emphasize appear, to be coordinated incidents involving 4 aircraft, 2 of which came from American Airlines. 2 of them came from United Airlines. Both airlines have confirmed the loss of their aircraft. Again, emphasizing that we're not apportioning any blame, but just reporting that the Taliban's ambassador to Pakistan has condemned the attacks as terrorist acts and demanded an investigation. Yasser Arafat, the Palestinian leader, gave a short statement after the incident in which he too condemned barbaric acts which had taken place, as he put it. Well, Washington has also been neutralized in many ways. Normal life down there has been neutralized, the capital of the United States. Our correspondent Rob Watson is at Pennsylvania Avenue up on Congress, near Congress, and I spoke to him a short time ago.
Well, scenes of complete chaos, really, and total gridlock, because as Johnny Diamond was saying, all the federal buildings have been evacuated. That includes Capitol Hill, it includes all the government buildings, and of course people have just been turfed out onto the streets. Add to that, of course, all the emergency vehicles headed in all directions here in Washington, some to the Pentagon, some here to where I am, just near Capitol Hill, and I think you get some sense of the scene. I think also the streets are packed with people, everybody, of course, talking about what has happened. They seem stunned by this attack on America's capital and the attack just up the road in New York City. People just not knowing what to make of it.
Is there provision in Congress for this kind of evacuation at high speed, for something like this?
Well, it seemed to work pretty effectively because I was standing just outside Congress when I heard a very loud explosion. Within minutes, the Capitol seemed to be completely evacuated. I spoke to a number of people who worked for Congress. They were streaming out in quite an orderly way, although, of course, looking rather shocked at what they'd seen and at what they'd heard. But I think the evacuation was pretty efficient.
Rob Watson speaking to me from Congress, and as he was speaking, you can see there the Pentagon and the smoke rising from there. The Pentagon, the perimeter of the Pentagon, has also been hit by a civilian passenger aircraft. Now, I was mentioning Yasser Arafat. This is what he said about the attacks.
To the American people for this terrible act. We are completely shocked, unbelievable.
Yes, Arafat a short time ago. United Airlines have now confirmed that they have lost a second aircraft, but they haven't confirmed the location. Just to confirm, United Airlines lost 2 aircraft, American Airlines lost 2 as well. Well, let's now go to New York. Johnny Diamond is there. He told me that much of the area has been closed down.
Well, what we understand now is that much of official Washington has been evacuated. This is because of what have been reports of 3 explosions in the U.S. Capitol. One, which we have obviously confirmed, you've almost certainly seen pictures of. The Pentagon has been attacked. A plane has gone into one side of it. Part of the building has collapsed. There are flames visible in the rest of the building. There are unconfirmed reports of a car bomb outside the State Department, which obviously houses the U.S. Foreign Affairs Department, and also reports of an explosion on the U.S. Capitol, which houses the U.S. Congress. Much of official Washington is now abandoned, evacuated, effectively paralyzed. Staff have been sent home, and security measures are being put in across the U.S. Capitol now. President Bush was supposed to be going back to the White House, journeying back from Florida when he heard about the World Trade Center. That won't be happening anymore. The White House has been evacuated. The security service is patrolling the grounds. We also hear, as you've probably heard, that all flights have been grounded within the United States. Having said that, there are reports, and I can stress there are all kinds of reports now going around, that a second plane is apparently heading for Washington. Completely unconfirmed report, but one which, as you can imagine, is most unhappy news for the authorities struggling to control the situation here in the nation's capital.
Johnny Diamond there in Washington. Well, Mike Bluestone, who's a counterterrorism expert, as you listen to this in Washington and New York, how does America begin to recover? This is a political challenge, a diplomatic challenge, a security challenge above all.
Absolutely. I mean, I obviously leave the political response to the politicians, but from a security point of view, the security agencies, both government and private, are going to be swinging into action now to come up with these alternative strategies so that some kind of normality can return to the business and civilian communities. As I said, there will be some contingency plans already in place, but because of the scale of this attack, it's going to be that much harder to implement. Now,
you deal, Mike Bluestone, with large companies. You advise them. How can they... We've just heard 50,000 people work in those 2 buildings alone. That takes no account for all the much, well, not small buildings, but the larger small buildings around the bottom of that whole area of Manhattan. We're talking about maybe 500,000 people. Large businesses, the heart of the American industrial and financial community. How do they begin to recover?
Well, I think what they need to do is to consider whether they have alternative sites. As I said before, all major corporations should and normally do have contingency plans. They normally have alternative sites that are ready to move into after a short period of disaster recovery. And clearly, because of the scale of this, it's going to take a few days. But I would expect to see within a few days some kind of activity resuming from the alternative accommodation. Some of it would have been arranged with companies within similar industries. There will be a pooling of resources here. There won't be too much worry about business competition. It'll be everyone helping out in a sense of cooperation and trying to get normality back into that city as quickly as possible.
All this at a time when the Dow was falling, the London FTSE was falling, the Dow was at its 17-year low. What effect does this have on economy?
Well, I think it's going to have a serious short-term effect, but I think the real test here is how quickly can these businesses, can the organizations get back to some kind of normality? How will their disaster recovery plans work? This is the ultimate test. This is the nightmare scenario. This is the ultimate test of that kind of planning.
Right, Mike Bluestone, thank you very much indeed. Let me just give you some information coming in a random way to me as we were speaking there. In Caracas, oil prices have gone up $3 in the wake of the attacks in the United States, according to the head of OPEC. A spokesman for Afghanistan's ruling Taliban said on Tuesday that Saudi dissident Osama bin Laden could not be responsible for any of the incidents which have taken place in New York and in Washington. European Union foreign ministers are to hold an emergency meeting on the US attacks. The implications of what's happened in America go far beyond the eastern seaboard of the United States. It's about the security and the political viability of so many other nations around the world, and the impact, not least on security and the way many countries run business and their economies, their politics, and just maintain democracy. Well, what about the effect on those who've been in power? The former Israeli Prime Minister Ehud Barak joined me in the studio shortly after the incidents. He told me he viewed this as an attack on civilization.
The world will not be the same from today on. It's an attack against our whole civilization. I don't know who is responsible. I believe we will know in 12 hours. If it is a kind of bin Laden organization, and even if it's something else, I believe that this is the time to deploy a globally concerted effort led by the United States, the UK, Europe, and Russia against all sources of terror, the same kind of struggle that our forefathers launched against the piracy on the high seas.
In your position as Prime Minister, Defense Minister, also formerly in the Army, were you ever aware of any incident planned like this?
Not in the dimensions, but different elements where clearly there was an attempt on the Twin Towers. A few years ago, there was an attempt to explode the Holland Tunnel leading into Manhattan. But of this size and a simultaneous attack, I don't think that anyone had predicted it in advance.
Is it something that security services, intelligence services could ever have got wind of?
I'm not sure, but this is not the case. It really happened in front of our eyes, and the question is what should be done in regard to it in order to avoid it in the future. It's going to be a tough struggle. There will be many tough and painful moments along the way, but I believe that if we will coordinate diplomatic, operational, intelligence, and economic activities that will not let them land at any airport and will isolate automatically any nation that is ready to host terror or support them. By doing this consistently along 6 or 10 years, we will reduce dramatically this challenge to all our way of life.
Your words, Mr. Barak, are very similar to the words used to justify missile defense in the United States, which may have taken another 10 or 15 years. Here we've seen low-tech hijacked by those with evil intent.
Yeah, I believe that it's, first of all, missile defense is also something which is clearly needed as long as there are rogue states, and it should be done, and it should be deployed maybe not on national level, but only on trans-regional level to cover exactly the threat from rogue states like Iran, Iraq, or Libya. But in this area, we will suffer. It will not be so easy to go aboard an airplane in the near future, but we have no way but to stand firm facing terror. Otherwise, all our way of life will be threatened. And to stand firm means to isolate from the world every nation that is hosting them and calling every terror thug with the accurate name and be ready with all the pains that come with it to act upon our observations.
What price might democracy have to pay, given what has happened in the last 3 hours in the United States, given what you're experiencing now in Israel, in the center of Jerusalem, from your own citizens now, with the bombing over the weekend?
There is no shortcuts. You know, our civilization is already highly vulnerable. Look at the entrances into the gates of boarding airplanes. It's a situation where it's not easy. Every simple step, crossing borders or going on a plane or on a ship, will become more complicated. But at the same time, it's a time to identify. There are no more than 5 or 6 countries in the world which are directly or indirectly responsible for hosting terror. There are no more than 10 or 15 terror thugs in the world. All the organizations are well known. The